Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into, well, a really intense part of the Hebrew Bible, Jeremiah chapter 15.
Yeah, it's definitely a chapter that doesn't pull any punches.
Yeah.
You've got these huge, sweeping declarations, and then this incredibly personal stuff right alongside it.
Exactly. It's that mix we want to unpack, the divine judgment aspect, the prophet's own anguish, and these surprising moments of assurance kind of moving in. Let's see what we can uncover.
Sounds good. It really does shift tone quite
It
dramatically,
does. And it starts off, wow, it hits you immediately with this stark pronouncement in the very first verse.
right? The part about Moses and Samuel.
Yeah. Even if Moses and Samuel were to stand before me, my heart would not go out to this people. I mean, just think about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Moses, the guy who always pleaded for Israel, right? And Samuel, this major prophet and judge, God saying through the text that even they couldn't change the outcome now.
It's basically signaling that the decision is final. Like, the point of intercession is passed.
Yeah.
That's how severe the situation is presented.
It really sets a heavy tone, doesn't it? And then verse 2 just lists these terrible options.
Death, sword, starvation, captivity.
Yeah. Like pick your disaster, those destined for death to death, and so on. There's no easy way out offered.
No, it's a picture of complete catastrophe, whichever way you turn, and then it gets even more graphic, describing the agents of destruction.
The 4 kinds of destroyers in verse 3, that really stood out to me.
The sword,
Yeah.
which is, warfare, but then dogs, birds, and beasts of the earth.
Right. It's not just the human enemy. It's like nature itself is turning against them, picking apart the remains. It suggests, well, utter desolation, total ruin.
A complete breakdown of everything, even basic dignity after death. It's harsh, and the text links this directly to reasons.
Yeah, it does. Verse 4 points back to King Manasseh's actions specifically.
Right, his past sins are cited as a key factor, but verse 6 broadens it out.
To the people's rejection and that phrase, you keep on backsliding, what exactly are we meant to understand by backsliding here?
Well, in this context, it's not just like a one-off mistake. It implies this persistent turning away, a constant pattern of regressing from their covenant, from what they knew was right.
So it's the ongoing refusal to change course.
Exactly. A stubbornness, you could say. The text frames it as, you haven't learned, you haven't changed your ways, and that's the core reason given for this judgment.
And the lack of compassion described for Jerusalem itself is chilling. Verse 5. Who will have pity on you? Who will stop to ask how you are?
Yeah, total isolation, abandonment, nobody cares anymore. It's a really bleak image.
Profoundly so. And the text describes God's own action as just, final. So I will lay hands on you and destroy you. I can no longer show compassion.
And that winnowing image in verse 7.
That's right. Explain that a bit. Winnowing, that's separating grain from chaff.
That's right. Farmers would toss the harvested grain into the air, and the wind blows away the light, worthless chaff, while the heavier grain falls down.
So God is pictured here tossing the people into the air at their own city gates.
Yeah, letting them be blown away like chaff. Discarded. It's an image of forceful separation, of being deemed worthless.
And again, the reason given right after. For they have not changed their ways. That theme is just hammered home.
It really is. And the human cost is then described in these incredibly painful details in verses 8 and 9.
Oh, yeah. The widows. More numerous than the sand of the sea. That gives you a sense of the scale.
Unimaginable scale. And mothers suffering sudden terror at midday.
At midday. Like the most unexpected time right in the middle of ordinary life.
Exactly. And then that specific heartbreaking image of the mother of 7.
That one's rough.
Yeah.
7 sons represented like the ultimate blessing, security, future.
Right. And she grows faint, breathes her last. Her sun will set while it is still day.
It's just such a powerful metaphor for hope dying prematurely, a whole future just extinguished.
Yeah.
Symbolizing the nation's fate, really.
Absolutely. It conveys the shock, the totality, the abrupt end of everything that mattered. It's brutal.
So that's the big picture for the nation. Devastating. But then the focus just shifts entirely, doesn't it?
Completely. Suddenly we're inside Jeremiah's head. His personal pain.
Verse 10. Alas, my mother, that you gave me birth. He's lamenting being born into this role.
Yeah, a man with whom the whole land strives and contends. He feels like everyone is against him.
And he makes that point, doesn't he? I haven't lent or borrowed, meaning I haven't done the usual things that make people enemies in business or whatever.
Right, he's saying, I'm innocent in my dealings, but everyone curses me anyway.
It really highlights the sheer burden of being the messenger here. hated just for speaking the words he was given.
His suffering is directly tied to his calling. The message is rejected, and so is he. It's deeply personal.
But then, right after that cry of pain, you get this kind of surprising little bit of assurance just for Jeremiah, verse 11.
Yeah, it seems almost out of place for a second.
Mm.
Surely I will deliver you for a good purpose.
Surely I will make your enemies plead with you in times of disaster. Wait, the people cursing him now will come begging later.
That's what it says. It's fascinating, isn't it? It immediately sets up a potential difference between his fate and the nation's fate.
Yeah, it suggests his path is distinct. He'll be delivered and maybe even sought out by those who currently hate him once things get really bad for them.
A real reversal of fortune implied there. And then there's that slightly obscure question in verse 12.
About breaking iron. Can a man break iron from the north or bronze?
Iron from the north is often taken to mean the military power coming down, like Babylon. Super strong, technologically advanced for the time.
So is the question basically saying, can you resist this? Can you break something this strong? Implying the answer is no.
That seems to be the point. Resistance is futile against this force, or perhaps against God's determined judgment. It's unbreakable.
Okay, and then boom, we're right back to the judgment on the people. Verses 13 and 14.
Yep. Wealth plundered without charge, meaning freely taken as deserved punishment, enslavement in a foreign land, God's anger burning like fire.
So that little flicker of hope for Jeremiah is immediately put next to the harsh reality for everyone else. That tension is just constant.
It really is. And then Jeremiah speaks again, praying directly to God in verses 15 to 18.
He asks God to remember him, care for him, and he says his suffering is for your sake.
He's linking his hardship directly to his obedience to God. And verse 16 is just, well, it's amazing insight into a prophet's life.
When your words came, I ate them.
They were my joy and my heart's delight, for I bear your name.
Ate them. That's so physical, so visceral. It's not just hearing or reading. It's like absorbing them into his very being.
Totally. It suggests this deep internal connection. Even though the message itself brings him grief from the outside, the source, the words themselves, the relationship with God they represent, that's his core joy.
What a paradox. Joy in the word, suffering because of the word.
Exactly. And it explains his isolation in verse 17. He can't join in with the revelers, the ordinary social life.
He sat alone because your hand was on me and you had filled me with indignation. The calling itself set him apart.
Yeah, the weight of the message, the divine perspective he carried, made it impossible to just blend in.
But even with that deep connection, that internal joy, the external pressure just gets to be too much, it seems. Verse 18.
Yeah. This is where he really cries out, "Why is my pain unending and my wound grievous and incurable?"
And then that incredibly raw question, will you be to me like a deceptive brook, like a spring that fails?
Wow. He's questioning God's reliability. After saying God's words were his delight, the suffering makes him ask, are you actually going to be there for me, God, or are you going to dry up when I need you?
It's just so human, so relatable, that even someone that connected can hit a point where the pain makes them question everything.
Absolutely. It shows the immense strain he was under. It's a moment of maybe not full-blown doubt, but intense frustration and anguish testing his faith.
So how does God respond to that? To being called a potentially deceptive brook?
God's answer in verses 19 to 21 is direct, but it starts with a condition, a challenge almost.
If you repent, God says. Repent from what? From the despair, the questioning.
Probably from letting the despair and pain lead him to question God's fundamental character and faithfulness. It's like God is saying, get back on track, realign yourself with who you know I am.
If you utter worthy, not worthless words, you will be my spokesman. So stay true to the message. Don't let your personal feelings corrupt it.
Exactly. It emphasizes the prophet's responsibility. Maintain the right posture, speak my words, not just vent your own frustration. There's a standard to uphold, even in suffering.
And then God lays out this dynamic in verse 19. Let this people turn to you, but you must not turn to them. What's that about?
It reinforces his separation. He's meant to be a fixed point of reference aligned with God. People might eventually come to him, like those enemies pleading, but he shouldn't compromise or drift towards their ways or thinking. Stand firm.
Don't get pulled into their backsliding.
Precisely. And then comes the big promise of protection, specifically for Jeremiah.
Right. Verses 20 and 21. This is powerful stuff. I will make you a wall to this people, a fortified wall of bronze.
Imagine that imagery. Bronze, strong, resilient, unyielding. They will fight against you, but will not overcome you.
And the reason why is the ultimate assurance. For I am with you to rescue and save you.
That's the core promise. God's presence guarantees his ultimate safety. Verse 21 repeats it. Saved from the wicked, redeemed from the cruel.
So it's this stark contrast. The nation faces ruin linked to their actions and failure to change. The prophet, delivering that message, faces intense opposition but is promised personal salvation and strength.
Yeah, the chapter really forces you to grapple with both sides of that coin. Divine judgment is presented as real, severe, and tied to consequences.
But then you also get this incredibly intimate portrait of the messenger. The cost, the isolation, the joy found in the connection despite the pain, and even moments of, near breaking point questioning.
That tension between the group's fate and the individual's promise really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About accountability, calling, resilience, what it means to stand firm when you're delivering a message nobody wants to hear.
And maybe think about what backsliding looks like in any context. That persistent turning away from what one knows is right, or that feeling of your sun setting while it's still day, that sudden loss of hope. These ancient words tap into some pretty universal human experiences, I think.
Definitely. Consequences, suffering, the search for meaning, faithfulness under pressure.
Yeah.
And it's all in there.
So we've journeyed through Jeremiah 15, from those harsh declarations of judgment, through the prophet's incredibly honest struggles, right to the specific, powerful promises of protection given just to him.
A real roller coaster, holding the fate of nation and the fate of the prophet in this dramatic balance.
Which leaves us with something to chew on, maybe. Think about those two promises to Jeremiah. First, his enemies will eventually plead with him when disaster strikes, verse 11. But then, God also promises to make him a fortified wall of bronze against those same people, verse 20.
Yeah. He's both a potential source of help for them in crisis and yet also fortified against them.
So what does that unusual dynamic tell us about the really complicated role of someone speaking truth, especially difficult truth, within a community? What does it actually mean to be a fortified wall? Strong, separate, maybe even oppositional towards the very people you're called to serve or warn, something to reflect on.